What to do, ladies and dudes? You know who I be. It's the Vulgar One, the Vulgar Son, the Vulgar Desperado, representing the Jabberjaws, here to give you and your crew some things to talk about in your living room. And today, I want to go over this article I saw on Bounding Into Comics. It actually made me happy to see Zack Snyder defending his work Batman v Superman because I personally thought it was a fantastic film. Now, whether his version of Batman and his version of Superman were your cup of tea, subjective reality is always true. I would make the argument that he objectively made a good film here. And I think because people view the Marvel Cinematic Universe as gospel, there were unfortunately critics and audiences alike were unable to take anything different under the banner of superhero films and actually accept, like, or treat it with any respect. Now, I just want to briefly go over this article. It's not a long article to begin with, but just want to give my thoughts and opinions on what he's saying. Coincidentally enough, keep your eyes out for my review of Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch. I coincidentally was working on a video for that because I found it kind of funny of how badly it was reviewed, but if you think about it, would it be reviewed really well in today's time, if you know what I mean? Stay tuned for that video. But before I go further on this one, you know what to do. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. Would really appreciate it on our road to 1,000. Thank you very much. Alright, so again, from Bounding Into Comics here, looks like they got this interview from over at The Direct, his Full Circle event. Zack Snyder accuses Batman v Superman critics of wanting a superhero romp instead of a movie you really need to pay attention to. And off the bat, I mean, if you've watched the movie, I mean, I think it's like, what, a 2.5 hour film the first time around, and then there's the Ultimate Director's Cut. It's like a 3 hour movie. We know Zack Snyder likes to film long movies, but yes, off top, from the theatrical run, this is not a movie that, you would know and get everything off the first watching, right? There are certain aspects of the film and certain, what's called mise-en-scène. It's kind of speaking through the film, if you will, what we might call Easter eggs, that's the more technical term. There's a lot of those things in this film that if you, pay attention, you would see. This is not a movie that is supposed to be, let's say, for the mouth breather. The article continues. Via The Direct at his Full Circle event, he discussed the previous flaws found in digging into the two heroes' motivations. I think that probably is what caused the movie to be so polarizing, Snyder said. I feel like a lot of people went into the movie going, oh, it's a superhero romp, right? Let's have fun with it. Personally, for me, that was always something that I found kind of odd when it came to the viewers of this movie. To me, it was almost like, hey, are you unfamiliar with who Batman and Superman are? I know a lot of people like to point out to the Christopher Reeve Superman and about how he's so motivational, inspiring, and blah, 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 blah. I'm just thinking that if you grew up in the 90s and the 2000s and you were watching Batman and Superman, the animated versions, there was some grit to both of them. Even Superman. And if you remember The World's Finest, the Superman Batman animated crossover shit, it still had a bit of a grittiness to it. I'm sorry, when Batman and Superman, outside of the 60s and 70s, when they get together, sometimes it's fucking serious, And I think what a lot of people here, it kind of just didn't matter, the level of the series, right? They were complaining about it was being too dark. They complained about it being Batman killing, that was so out of the normal. And yeah, sure, Batman is not a murderer, but, I mean, by this time, mind you, this movie came out in 2016, we have already seen a violent killing Batman in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Batman. These weren't or rather new concepts to us. They weren't foreign. Zack Snyder really did do his homework, and I'll bet an amalgamation of different versions of Batman. He put in somebody that was recognizable to you on the screen. You had people complaining that it was just too gritty and stuff. I mean, even the Superman, killing Zod, I'm just like, he's making something that's kind of realistic, and like I said, it's a little bit darker, but to me it was never so dark that it deserved all that hate that people gave it. I mean, truly believed that it was supposed to be this happy-go-lucky film. And I mean, Batman's just not like that, and me personally, I like when Superman's a little bit more serious. Superman's way too strong to be having a good time saving the day, because then it's just a fucking Marvel movie. He'd just be making quips and jokes, and I don't think that's fun to watch, personally. Like, Superman is, when his back's against the wall, like, shit's hitting the fan, that's a good time in the film. Like, Superman's way too powerful and OP to just be, having fun and being whatever, quote, inspiring. Like, I want to see this man balls to the wall action. I want to see him fighting. And personally, that's where I think Zack Snyder was going with that. You kind of have to nerf this dude a little bit, or at the very least, bring in heavy hitters to make this even worth watching. That's why Superman works as a comic book and a cartoon, but it's a little bit harder in a movie if you're not, treating it with the respect that I think Zack Snyder did. It's not always going to be fun and games. Sometimes it's going to be real. And on that note, the article continues. Sadly, buyer's remorse intervened. Snyder explained, "We gave this sort of hardcore deconstructive, heavily layered, experimental, modern mythological superhero movie that you really need to pay attention to. That was not cool for them. That's not something anyone wanted to do. They were like, what? No, that's exhausting. Why do they fight at night? I hate that." And again, to me, that again is like some of the big problem here when it comes to the critics of this film. One day I probably will do a full-on review of why I think this movie is actually good, and why I think it just kind of got a lot of unjust hate. To me, this movie is, if you will, the modern Star Wars prequel. This is going to be one of those films that, and hopefully James Gunn doesn't fuck up the next DCEU or whatever, but, people will realize, oh, hey, we actually had something here. And for the most part, let's be real, the fact that they were able to put out the Snyder Cut of Justice League and all that, I don't know if there was just some backwards deal that, made that happen, but, people do know that, hey, there was some real good work here. There was an actual good film, a good story, a good universe here. So, I do think people are kind of aware that, they fucked up. But I don't think people fully know how much they fucked up, because here was a film that, like he said, this was big. This was a very modern myth kind of story. You could kind of tell with the fact that he was bringing in the gods and Darkseid and like all these like really huge concepts. And if you're familiar with the DC universe, you would have saw the writing on the wall. Like, you would have saw that, there was something really fantastically driven here by a man that actually gives a fuck about these properties. See, Marvel and Disney, on the other hand, they're more about what gets people into seats, and unfortunately, that's not good for storytelling. That's not good for the creative audience, because that's how you end up with 10 years and over half of the movies being utterly the same. Okay, I find it hard-pressed that you would find anybody, right? Anybody that would give you any Marvel movie in their top 10, top 5 favorite movies of all time. Not just superheroes, just all genres movies. And that's because they're just carbon copy joke fest, all right? They're the, kind of like, I don't know, summer comedy of, the early 2000s, right? Like, that's kind of what these movies have become, or as we all liken it to, the Westerns. Like, they're just becoming very boring, and they're not entertaining. They try to go big in presentation and scale, but again, like Thor Ragnarok being one example, you can't have like all these jokes with these cataclysmic events happening all around you. It just doesn't make sense when your characters aren't taking the plot and the world seriously. And I think that is kind of a big problem with the Marvel verse, for many years, to be perfectly honest. But I digress. I think with a lot of people, they kind of showed their ass. They showed how dumb they were when it came to this movie. Like, again, everyone's got their own subjective taste, but a lot of people kind of treated this movie like it was overcomplicated. Or a lot of people treated this movie like it was so foreign that it was just like unfathomable to believe that one, Batman could be gritty and Superman could be gritty. It's like, man, have you never picked up a comic book? Have you never watched like a cartoon episodes? Like, it's not all fun and games, and I think it went to show you how much of a normie audience is running the movie game and maybe a lot of other entertainment worlds. But I think that was like the biggest problem, was you had critics like destroy it before anybody could actually love it. I'd make the argument too that, it was Disney, right? Like, I'd make the argument that, people went in there to go and hate it just to make sure that Marvel would succeed, because I don't give a fuck what you say. I would argue that, yes, Batman v Superman is objectively a better film than 90% of the Marvel movies. Yes, it's better than Endgame. Yes, it's better than Civil War. It's better than all that shit. And I'm sorry about you. Like, this is structurally a good film. The way it is written, the way the story is told, the way the characters are introduced. It's a very good film. Like, oh, the Martha moment, though. Don't give a fuck. Sorry about you. It's actually a really, really well done film. That's something that we actually need to go back to. I mean, I think for most people, they would count the Nolan trilogy as like the last time you get like an actual well done, objectively good film that is a superhero film that goes outside of the superhero genre. Like, oh, it's a good superhero movie. Like, no, it's actually just a good film. That's personally how I feel about Batman v Superman. The way the dialogue, just some of the, like, I remember like small details, right? There's like a certain scene where Superman's talking with his mother, but the dialogue is overlaid of the scene the scene before it goes to her and him having a discussion. And it reminded me of a comic book, like where you have these thought bubbles or speech bubbles on the panel, and then it goes to the next panel where it's actually the people talking. Like, there are small details in that film. Like I said, I might have to do a full review of this one day to kind of really show, like, yo, this is actually a good film here. But it's shit like that where it's like, man, I can't believe all the hate that this movie got. Again, it doesn't have to be your favorite, doesn't have to be, your cup of tea, but this was objectively a well written, directed movie. And because of the autism of society, I would say, they couldn't handle anything different. And I think that was the nail in the coffin for the DCEU, because people just could not handle different. They wanted happy-go-lucky, and now we're bored of that. And that's kind of on, society's fault for that. This is why we have all the same ass movies. This is why we're all getting reboots. Zack Snyder being the best example, why we have so many reboots, because Hollywood does not want to take chances, because you people out there will destroy it. You people will destroy anything different because you'd like kill it with fire. It's nothing I remember. It's nothing same things I haven't seen before. So you got to kill it with fire, and that's kind of how we end up with what we have now, sadly. So what's your thoughts and opinions on this? Maybe you're like me and you actually did enjoy the movie and thought that Zack Snyder and the film and his vision was getting way more unjust hate than he deserved. Or maybe you're a staunch defender and this was a bad direction. This was a terrible route for the DCEU. Maybe you thought it was too dark and gritty. Either way, I'm curious about your opinion. I venture to gather that most people are on the side of that you hated it. But maybe, as it's been several years and, as the MCU has become the MCU, maybe you actually can look back at that movie and be like, you know what, there was something cool and different, gritty and fucking manly, like, that actually would have been tight to see fully explored. But, let a nigga know in the comments. I'm curious about this one, but you know what it is. Jabberjaw's in the booth, Vulgar Desperado. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.